All right, that looks good. All right, so I'm going to go through.
Volume up.
Can people hear me all right? All right, I'm going to get started at the beginning of the PowerPoint here, and I will give opportunities for questions at the end. And if you think of something after today's session, go ahead and call or email me. I am going to keep a running questions document on the public health grant page, which I'll share the link to at the very end. That way, if people have asked a question, everyone will be able to see the answer. I'm trying to make everything very fair and transparent. So that's part of that effort. So today what we're going to be doing is giving you all information on the Public Health Fund and what the application looks like. There are a few changes to the application process and the timeline this year, so I'll make sure to point those out in case you've applied in the past and you're wondering what things might look like this time around. And then at the end, like I said, I'll give you all a chance to ask questions. So the Public Health Fund is a grant fund that comes out of Cook County's budget, and PHHS has played a role since 2018 where we facilitate grant making that aligns with our community health assessment. So as a department, Public Health and Human Services has its mission to support the health, safety, and well-being of our community. So I should back up. I should have introduced myself. My name is Grace. I work in the department, and I'm the staff along with Allison McIntyre, the PHHS director, that really help facilitate the request for proposals process. So we put out the application. We usually put out a media release. I'm hoping to go onto the radio as well and just try to really amplify the fact that this fund exists and that nonprofits in the community are welcome to apply. PHHS as a department has an advisory council, which is a group of people in the community who are interested in providing us with support to work towards our mission. It's a volunteer group of community members, and it's a group that meets every other month throughout the year, and it's not limited to this grants program. It's more generally a group that advises us on how we run our programs. And within that group, there's a smaller group of people who have volunteered their time to review grant applications and provide funding recommendations to the board. So the staff's role is really to facilitate the process, make sure that applicants know what's expected of them to submit an application, and to help the review subcommittee go through a process where they talk over the different applications we've received, whether they meet what we were looking for in funding, and then to make those funding recommendations to the Board of Commissioners. So in the end, the Board of Commissioners is the entity that makes the final decisions regarding funding each year. So that's a high-level overview of what this grant program looks like. So under state statute, counties have the authorization to contract with agencies that provide services within our jurisdiction that serve a public purpose. So that's kind of the legal background to this grant program. And for many years, the board granted a certain amount of what they call discretionary funds to community agencies each year in the areas of arts and culture and public health. Then back in 2018, the board moved the responsibility for kind of reviewing all the proposals and making recommendations for funding to this subcommittee of PHHS. So they're still involved. It's just that this subcommittee does quite a bit of the legwork, and PHHS staff, myself and Allison, help facilitate that process. Every year, we're hopefully getting better. We're aspiring to get better, have clearer instructions on how to apply, make it a more streamlined process, and then to also get the Board of Commissioners the information that they feel like they need to make the final funding decision. So this will be the fourth time we are going through this process as PHHS and the review subcommittee. So last year, we had a total of $224,620 requested by local nonprofits And we were able to award a total of $137,700 to 6 different community agencies. Karen, I see you have a hand up.
Yeah, how many people requested that 224? Is it like 10?
Last year it was 7. So 6 out of 7 agencies that applied received funding. So for this year, the application deadline will be June 27th. Judy, I see you have a hand up as well. You're on mute.
Sorry. Who are the 6 grantees this year?
At the very end, I will show you kind of, we have a grant web page on our new website, and you can see exactly who the grantees are and how much they were granted. And it's a retrospective that goes back to when we started facilitating the grant funds. So I'll show that at the end, just because I think it's nice to have that visual and know where that information is if you're interested in accessing it later on.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. So we're, like I said, our deadline for applications this year is June 27th. We're really looking for proposals that address equitable access to programs and services. And we're also looking for funding requests that fall within at least one of the priority health areas that have been identified within our community health assessment. So the health assessment is a big project that PHHS undertakes every 5 years. Believe it or not, this is one of the years we're going to revisit that, but this is what we have at this point in terms of identified health priority areas. So these are areas that the community came together and decided we wanted to put focus and attention towards, and that's why they're considered the priority areas for this funding. So those are access to specialty medical services, behavioral health, safe and stable housing, services for elders, services for families with young children, and substance abuse. So here's kind of the whole overall timeline for the year. So we opened the grant period, the RFP period, back on May 31st. Today, the 7th of June, we have our information session. On the 27th, applications will be due. We're hoping to have the funding recommendations from the grant review committee go before the county board sometime in late July. It's a bit of an ambitious timeline this year, but the reason that this is moved up is we received feedback from the grant review subcommittee that it was really important to them that the full amount of grant requests be taken into consideration as the county board is creating its budget for 2023, rather than after the budget has already been set. So that is why the timeline is moved up this year. Hopefully from here on out, this becomes the new norm, and then it's less of a surprise for people when they see the grant period opened up a few months earlier than they were expecting. We're hoping that after the board makes their funding decisions later this summer, we'll be able to send those notification of funding recommendations to the applicant agencies. In December, the final levy will be set by the commissioners. And then by February 2023, the applicants that were awarded funding will receive their grant awards for the year. Then, every April is when we're hoping to have the annual reports due. So next April, entities that received funding and used that funding this year, 2022, would be expected to make a report on their grant activities before they're eligible to apply again. So we want to make sure that agencies that have applied in the past have successfully completed what they set out to complete, and that we're able to ask any questions we might have before they have that opportunity to apply again. So this is kind of the big picture that we're looking at. So what does the process look like? Just in full transparency, this is kind of what happens after an agency submits their application. So the reviewers on this subcommittee get copies of each grant application. We're trying to be paperless, but if somebody really wants to have that hard copy, we're happy to print off copies and send them to members of our review group if that's going to help them, look things over. We have a score sheet that basically kind of asks some questions about, did the applicant respond to the question adequately? And it's the same score sheet for every single applicant. So we're able to kind of have a common tool to help us look at the applications that we've received. Typically, the review subcommittee meets 2 to 3 times. One, just to talk through applications. Sometimes we've had to extend that into 2 times just because it's a lot of conversation. It's taken up to, I think, 4 hours to review all the applications in the past. And that's a long time to be in a meeting, especially over Zoom. So we've had to break it up sometimes in the past. And then there's typically like a part 2 that is actually making the funding recommendations to the board. So one is kind of that scoring initial conversation. And then the part 2 is making the funding recommendations that PHHS then passes on to the county board. And then the county board makes the final funding decisions, and that's all dependent on whether it fits within the levy when it's set in December. So like I said before, we've shifted the timeline earlier into the year so we can allow for the total amount of funds requested to be considered as the county is creating its 2023 budget. A couple other things that are new this year. I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a minute and then start again so you can actually see what the application looks like. We used Microsoft Forms for the application this year. There are 2 financial attachments that we're asking for. One is a budget and one is a copy of the nonprofit's 990, which is a tax form that agencies are required to submit to the IRS. So, and that will say that you're a nonprofit agency within the 990. So those both will get sent to PHHS. The application itself will be in Microsoft Forms. And part of it is, we've tried to be really streamlined in asking the same questions of everyone, but we're hoping that using Microsoft Forms just kind of makes it easier to compare apples to apples in terms of everyone kind of has the same length of response. Sometimes we get certain agencies writing very short, concise responses and others writing quite a bit. So this is really just an effort for us to try to make it easier for our review group to compare the applications that we receive. We also came up with a budget template that's, again, that same purpose, helping our review group really compare like to like in terms of what it is that agencies are asking for in their funding. So now's the part where I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and then start sharing my screen again. I'll give everyone who is here today, I think before you leave the meeting, if you wouldn't mind putting your email address in the chat box, I'll make sure I can then send you a copy of the PowerPoint. And then you'll also have access to all of the materials on our website. So I'm going to stop sharing. Then I'm going to start sharing again. Here we go. So this is on our website. So if you just went to the Cook County website, you can also navigate here by going to the tab on the top that says Government, then Departments. Oops. This is not working out. And then go to Public Health and Human Services. We'll just do it together here. Public Health. And then Public Health has its own grants page. So it's easier to just use the link that I'll put in the chat box, but you can see under the grants page, this is where we're going to store all of our information about the Public Health Fund. So you can find a link to our community health assessment if you want to read more about that and see if you're aligning with those priority areas. To the question about who had been funded in the past, you can also see here there's a historical summary of Public Health Fund grant recipients from 2019 to 2022, just something our fiscal team put together. I'm not sure if you can still see the new tab that popped open, but this is showing over time which agencies have applied for funding and how much funding they received through the Public Health Fund over the past 4 years. We did have a couple new agencies apply for funding in 2022. So if you see that little kind of, or some that were funded earlier on and then did not reapply for funding afterwards. So that is available on this grants page to explore. Also, you can find on here all the application materials. So you'll see the copy of the media release. You'll also see on here, there's 2 downloads, and I'll bring your attention to both of them. So I mentioned that we're using, oh, this might be something that's kind of messy with the screen share, but you can open each of these. The Public Health Fund application is a Word document, looks very much like the 2022 application. The reason I'm bringing your attention to this is because once you get in Microsoft Forms, you're not going to be able to save your work. So I would recommend copying and pasting from a Word document into Microsoft Forms. That way you won't be, working on the application and have to start partway through or stop, and then you won't have saved your work. So save it in a Word document. If you, let me see if I can actually just open the Word document and share my screen that way. No, my window is invalid. I think I'm just not waiting for it to open. There it is. Okay. So you'll see, this looks just like it did in 2022. It has the updated information, but it will look very familiar to people who've applied in the past. And again, it has that same link to that grants page. It has, the 2 attachments that you'll email to us in PHHS. And it also says, go ahead and copy and paste into Microsoft Forms. I'm hoping this is the time saver that we're all really wishing for in terms of just like, really organizing the applications well for our review committee, but it's always an adventure with new technology. So it's the same. You'll also see as you kind of scroll down, we're asking for essentially the same information that we asked for in years past. It really is going to look very familiar. We did try to streamline a few questions after the review committee gets together. We have kind of, and provides recommendations to the board. We have sort of a time to get together and reflect on how we can improve the process for the upcoming year. So we did, change a couple questions a little bit, but essentially it's the same.
So Grace, did you mention that the Microsoft Forms will have limits on the number of?
It's overall. So it's not, if you're fighting with Microsoft Forms, just please email me or reach out and call me. Because like I said, it's the first time that we've used it. And so there's a limit overall to the number of characters. It's not a limit per text field.
Okay.
So it seems like it's quite generous, but if you run into any kind of road bump there, just let me know and we'll try to work through it.
Oh no, I prefer you put it like 25 words. 25 word max.
I mean, I have been on the other end of this, and I do feel like as frustrating as it is sometimes to, have to work within word limits, it does sometimes make you more concise, and that can be a good thing. So there's definitely a balance to be had there. So that's pretty much it. I'm gonna stop sharing and start sharing again. It's a little bit, it might feel a little bit chaotic, but I want to also go to Microsoft Forms. It's on here as 2023 Public Health Fund online application. So this text is exactly the same as it was in the Word document, but it gives you the basic instructions here, including that you can't save your work and continue later. I think that's something people should know before they get started. It's kind of in sections. So you'll see these are the exact same bits of information we are asking for in that Word document. It's just now in online format. And you kind of have to finish one section to be able to go on. So I'm not going to be able to show you all of them, but you'll be able to basically be prompted to move through the questions that you'll see in that Word document. So I'd recommend really downloading the Word document, using it as a reference point, kind of knowing what you're getting into as you start the application. And then when you actually go to fill it out in the online form, it should be seamless. I'll also stop sharing and then I'll reshare one more time. When you go onto that grants page, there's also the project budget template that you can download. It just takes a minute for me to be able to open it. Okay. So it's pretty basic. So it's just basically asking for what it is that you're intending to spend the money on. And if you get into this section and something doesn't make sense, you can reach out to us and we can try to answer questions that you might have, but they're kind of basic areas that an agency might put grant funds towards. So for example, staff salary or fringe, travel or training costs for staff, program supplies, outreach, scholarships for programs. I know there's certain applicants that have applied to be able to provide scholarship funds in the past. And then if there's anything else we missed on here, you can feel free to put it in as well. Again, we tried to make this very simple, user-friendly. It'll add together the different amounts that you're requesting. If you have portions of this covered by other sources of income, put that in here. And then there's a space to add in notes. So again, we're really hoping this helps our review subcommittee just compare apples to apples in terms of what it is that an organization is applying for. But we're absolutely open to feedback from applicants because this is a new form this year that we're using. And so just to review, the bulk of the application is happening online this year. And there's 2 financial attachments, an agency's 990 for 2021, so the last fiscal year, and then that project budget that you can download off the website. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this link to the web page in the chat. That way you can just kind of navigate right there. And if folks have questions, I'm going to move to that. I'm going to grab my pen here so I can remember what people are asking so that I can post it online afterwards. Judy, let's see, let's start with you.
Judy, you're on mute.
Sometimes that's really good when I'm on mute. Anyway, I do have several questions. Number one, uploading the requested 990 form and the project template, will that be easy to do in the Microsoft Forms system?
That's a good point of clarification. So the Microsoft Forms, when I was developing the form, there's a glitch where people outside of our agency aren't able to upload documents directly into Microsoft Forms. So for those attachments, just email them to the address in the application. So you'll see it. It'll prompt you once you get to that part of the application to email it to phhs.co.cook.mn.us. So it'll just be right there and it'll tell you where to send those documents. So as you're going through in the application, you'll be prompted to just send those separately because I wasn't able to figure out a workaround for that.
Okay, and then my second question is actually quite huge because before today's meeting, I did go into the website and I did try and download and save these PDFs. I've got a brand new MacBook Air computer this year, and it would not allow me to do so. So I am wondering if is it because I'm on an Apple system? I'm not certain, but I did try and download all of these documents and it would not allow it.
Are you able to get onto and that was from that webpage that I put in the chat box?
Yes, that was from the webpage. So it's not something that I want us to work out here, but I
Yeah.
just want you to know that I wasn't able to do it before today's meeting.
I'm happy to send them in an email. I'll make sure on the webpage that there's just a place where people can go if they have questions about the materials. That way, if others have that same issue, they can contact us and we can just send them directly. Yeah.
Okay. And then my last question was, do applicants attend the board meeting that the county commissioners are discussing the grant applications at, in case there are further questions about them and their organization? Or is that just a closed meeting amongst the county board of commissioners considering and discussing the applicants?
So all the board meetings are public meetings. So it's not, it's not behind closed doors in terms of like anyone could attend the
It's
board.
a part of a regular monthly meeting, so anyone can attend.
Yep. It's not structured so that applicants are, kind of making their application to the board. They're certainly welcome to attend. I mean, the way that we kind of tried to have it structured is that the application process kind of allows there to be a significant amount of time to that review committee to go through the applications. And then Allison is typically the one who takes the recommendations and condenses them down and then presents them to the board and answers questions. That's how it's happened in the past. But I think if you wanted to be present at the board meeting where they're talking through the proposals, you'd certainly be welcome to attend.
All right,
We
thank
also
you.
have them live streamed on YouTube and then they're recorded there. So if you're curious, like after the fact, to go back and kind of listen to the discussion or attend virtually, there's other options to participate in the board meetings.
All right, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. And Mary, I see you have a question about if you can have a copy of the PowerPoint slides. Yes, so I have most of your emails, and then Bev, I have your email on file as well. I'll go ahead and email a copy of the PowerPoint slides to our current grantees as well as everyone who attends the info session. And if you know of others in the community that might be interested and maybe don't know about the opportunity, please get the word out. I mean, we try our best with the media release and the outreach to let people know. But I mean, we're always welcoming applicants from, new programs and agencies as well. So please help us get the word out if you know of others in the community that might want to apply.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions or comments?
I have some comments I'd just like to share with this group. One thing I think is really important, and Grace, I was so happy to hear that you're going to go on WTIP to talk about the process and to make sure that the word gets out that we're being equitable to all our nonprofits in the community. You should all know that there are some individuals who have come forward and expressed concern about the county allocating funds to nonprofits. It's a very small number of comments that have been made. We do have statutory authorization to do this. And it came up at a budget advisory committee that I was sitting in on a number of months ago. Most of the remarks were more towards arts organizations as opposed to other organizations. A lot of it was things that were in the past. So again, Grace, I applaud you for putting that history of the last 4 years on the website so that our community can see who has applied, how the money has been allocated. That's really important. But concern is because of the county levy, and there are people very concerned about the amount of that levy, that nonprofits should not be a part of it. And again, it's a very small group, but I just want all of you to be aware of it. It's really important that we all and I'm somebody who really supports nonprofits in the community, that we talk about our organizations and the benefit that we give to many people that live here in Cook County. The more we can get that message out, the better. And so just be good ambassadors of your programs, get the word out, and I think we'll all be in really good shape.
Thank you for that background, Commissioner Sullivan. Appreciate that.
I also think it's really nice that we, have everything online so that people can look at what are those priority health areas that we're focusing on, and it becomes transparent for the public, and that's very important.
You guys are nailing it down. Good job.
We're getting better every year. At least we're trying to get better every year. I hope we're getting better every year when it comes to
Hopefully all of us, it's about all of us working on continuous improvement, and it's just going in a really good direction.
Who gives out the grants for the arts organizations? Where did that part go?
I'm not as familiar with that process because it's not within our department. Commissioner Sullivan, maybe you have a bit more.
Well, the concerns are, and again, I was not commissioner when those big grants were given out, but I can share that some remarks have been made about, let's say, for example, the art colony, and that they were getting grants at one point in time, and they're not paying taxes, which is, what we hear about nonprofits and contributing to our community, and they contribute in many other ways, but I know I'm preaching to the choir here. But just the fact that there were concerns that organizations that were making money and making profit were asking for grants.
Wow.
And that's really kind of the general background information.
But who's making those decisions now? What department did the arts go to?
I do not recall seeing any arts grants in the last year.
No,
Wow.
I would ask Administrator Yorkie because I'm just, like I said, I'm just not involved with the arts.
Yeah.
Well, it used to be like WTIP and the Playhouse, and we used to come and make like a big dealio and present, and so it's really nice. All of that has been taken out of the process.
Yeah, it's really focused on public health. Yeah.
Judy? Oops, you're on mute.
Of course I am. I'm sorry.
It's fine.
I do have one more question before I dive in and put a lot of hours into writing this grant request. Under services for families with young children, is nutritional health, food insecurity considered part of the vision of public health and human services? Obviously, I'm representing a nonprofit school lunch program that is not covered by federal school lunch programs or gets funding from any other source other than grants. So is my organization, Great Lunch with the charter school, is that an organization that would be eligible for applying for this grant?
I would say to go ahead and apply. Look at the link in that webpage to the community health assessment and community health improvement goals. The one that I think the exact language of that area is that families with young children will experience community support. So if you read those areas and think to yourself, yes, what I'm applying for this area, go ahead and apply. I mean, there's no harm in applying as long as you feel like, yeah, I read this and I see that what I'm applying for is going to be a fit. Go ahead and submit an application, and it winds up being a group discussion with the review sub-council or subcommittee. But we try to cast a broad net and then review all the applications against the same kind of criteria. So yeah, I would encourage you to apply.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much.
I did get another question earlier today, and I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna put on that same web page the questions that I've received if they come in outside of this info session, but it was about in-home daycare providers that aren't nonprofits and whether they could apply with a fiscal agent that is a nonprofit. And I would say go ahead and apply, and the review council would go ahead and look at that the same as they have. We have had that happen in the past with other programs that are not themselves a nonprofit, but they would have to fall under those community health improvement goals, and they would have to serve a public purpose, because that is the kind of authority that we have to provide these grants, is that they serve a public purpose. So that was the answer for that one as well. So if they were applying through a nonprofit and the nonprofit were their fiscal host and they serve a public purpose and fall into the community health improvement goal areas. So that was the only other question I've got so far. All right. Well, I think the recording has worked. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording and thank everyone for being here. I'll send out the PowerPoint, and my email is going to be, right there for anyone to reach back out if more questions arise.